Hey there, how are you doing? So I want to show you today a butane stove and the options that you have available to you. This stove here is called a remote stove because its fuel source is remote, obviously, using a hose. And it uses these types of butane canisters, which are either pure butane, isobutane, or a combination of butane and a little bit of propane to bring down the boiling point. Boiling point for this is about -5 degrees Celsius when it's just pure butane. With a blend, it goes down to about -12 to 14 degrees Celsius. This here is just pure butane, and it can be used with this stove using this type of converter. So what you do is you use this bayonet type connection. It connects and it gives you the ability to connect these Lindell valve connectors to this thread right here. Okay, so that's called Lindell valve, and that's an inch-based system, so that's 7/16 inch thread. It's kind of an odd thread size, but popular worldwide. Okay, now in order to use this same stove with propane, you need some of these types of connectors and a way to connect it here. But the problem with that is that butane is a lower pressure gas, as you can see. It's using a very thin container versus propane, which is over here, which uses a very thick container. And as a result, you have a lot of pressure going in here for something that's normally running on a much lower pressure. So what I did is I connected this long 1 meter hose to propane, but I have a regulator in the middle. Now this is not your normal regulator that you would use for a barbecue grill. It's a high pressure regulator which runs at 2 bar, or two atmospheres of pressure. In the world of inches, that's about 30 psi. Okay, so what that is, these are the parts here. So I have the high pressure regulator and the propane fittings right here. So that's the propane fitting right here and right here. So this is, again, in inch world, this is 1 inch UCF, and this is a 7/16 inch Lindell valve type connector. In the middle, this is that type of converter that you would use between the propane connection and your butane connection, which is similar to the ones that I have right here. Okay, and a lot of people connect these directly to their propane tank, and they're able to get by, but you have very little leeway in terms of how much you open this valve to allow the fuel to flow in here. And it creates a semi-dangerous situation where the flame gets too high and it lifts off of the stove and then goes out. And then what you have is just the fuel coming out of here as a gas. And if that fuel sinks down to any area where there's a flame, you can have an explosion or a fire. It creates a situation that's pretty dangerous. I was trying to replicate this type of connection here, which is a 2 atmosphere or 30 psi regulator here that goes to this type of connector for this dual fuel stove. So this stove runs on butane or it runs on propane with this hose. But this connector here, which is a 16mm thread, type thread here, is very difficult to find. In fact, almost impossible to find something that converts from this to this Lindell valve type of connection. So to get from here to there is like finding an honest politician. It's almost impossible. So what I did is I've connected this up here, and I'll give a demonstration. Just keep in mind, I have a fire extinguisher standing by, and I'm gonna get the butane away from there and we'll light it. So turn on the fuel supply and ignite it, and as you can see, that flame is much more controllable. Usually it's such a high pressure I have to just have this barely on, and here I have the ability to regulate it quite a bit. And what's nice about that is when you put a kettle on there, instead of the flame just spreading off and going over the sides, it stays where it's supposed to be, which is at the bottom of the kettle. Okay, so that's another reason to have this. So in summary here, let me turn this off. We have the butane connector right here that's connected to the propane connector using a regulator. So 2 atmosphere, 30 PSI, high pressure regulator, and it's coming from this propane tank. So you have a much more manageable and easier to control pressure for this type of stove. So what that means for you is that instead of spending $7 for one of these, with this type of propane tank, that's about 6 cents worth of fuel in there. It's 50 grams. So this is a very, very small container. There are other types that are much larger. There's the disposable propane tank or even refillable size that hold about 460 grams. But I chose to use this one for purposes of demonstration. Okay. The other thing is, if you do make this, make sure you use some type of sealant. Make sure that these seals here are not leaking in any way, and make sure you also practice safety protocols, which is, having some ventilation and keeping the area safe by having a fire extinguisher. Okay. Thank you so much, and take care.